Hello, and welcome back to Learn English today. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here with me today. Thank you for hitting play, for tuning in, and for backing this show. Every time you listen, whether you're on a walk, commuting, or simply unwinding, you're not simply boosting your language abilities, you're also picking up knowledge that can enhance your daily existence. And I genuinely value your commitment and your faith. I'm aware you have numerous choices available, yet you've decided to join me here, and that's incredibly meaningful. Today, we're going to explore something crucial, something that many individuals face difficulty with, regularly, without even recognizing it. The subject is how perfectionism serves as a stealthy progress destroyer. You may have come across the term perfectionism previously. Possibly you're familiar with it, meaning constantly striving to achieve perfection. However, in this session we'll dive deeper. We'll explore how that drive for flawlessness can actually prevent you from advancing, from building skills, and from developing into the individual you aspire to become. Here's the reality. Perfectionism is peaceful. It dwells in obscurity. It doesn't make noise, yet it subtly restrains you, and that's the reason we characterize it as silent. It commands you to hold back until every detail is correct, prior to beginning, prior to communicating, prior to moving ahead. Yet whenever you pause for excellence, you forfeit possibilities. You devote additional moments contemplating rather than implementing. You experience worry, tension, concern of errors. And once that takes place, advancement diminishes. Because genuine advancement, it doesn't demand excellence. It demands implementation. It demands gradual movements, perhaps clumsy ones. It demands fearlessness, not constraint. And this material becomes vital specifically if you're building English proficiency. For numerous learners, possibly including you, wait for communication until their delivery feels flawless, till they grasp each linguistic pattern, each vocabulary item, the ideal expression. Yet that expectation transforms into an obstruction. Perfectionism silences you when what you actually need is application. Since without application, there's no genuine advancement. Missteps aren't opponents, they're educators. They're the mechanism your consciousness absorbs information, how your certainty expands. Therefore, in this session, we'll investigate why perfectionism appears beneficial at start, why it really harms your accomplishment, and which uncomplicated approaches you're able to use to stop it from restraining you. Therefore, remain present, pay careful attention, and in case you wish to train, attempt saying a portion of the expressions verbally. We're experiencing this together, bit by bit. Let's commence. What constitutes perfectionism? Perfectionism describes when someone consistently desires everything to be absolutely flawless, without any imperfections or challenges. It appears to be something constructive, given that striving to perform activities skillfully is typically favorable. Yet perfectionism differs. It isn't merely concerning doing tasks competently. It concerns experiencing that anything you accomplish is insufficient, and you should continuously enhance and refine it till it becomes flawless. Individuals exhibiting perfectionist conduct frequently suppose that if something doesn't achieve 100% accuracy, it lacks significance whatsoever. This style of reasoning may intensify stress and may inhibit development and transformation. In fundamental language, perfectionism indicates you establish extremely demanding criteria for yourself and feel disappointed or displeased when you fail to accomplish them. As an illustration, consider someone composing an electronic communication in English. A perfectionistic individual could dedicate lengthy intervals examining each individual vocabulary element. Each individual punctuation mark and every phrase repeatedly since they fear delivering the message. Despite a minor oversight, in place of distributing it immediately and continuing, they commit excessive effort attempting to guarantee it's completely ideal. This might produce postponements, consume energy, and generate unwarranted tension. Perfectionism emerges in diverse facets of routine behavior. For illustration, certain individuals sanitize their residence repeatedly, since they notice insignificant details that aren't precisely appropriate. Certain individuals author an academic piece yet never transmit it, given that they repeatedly think it remains unripe. Others decline beginning a fresh undertaking, given that they're concerned they'll fail to complete it correctly initially. In each case, perfectionism requires the individual to hesitate, modify, and reconsider, as opposed to merely reacting and evolving organically throughout existence. Regarding acquiring English competency, perfectionism serves as a frequent problem many learners encounter, regardless of recognizing it. Perhaps you've encountered apprehension around conversation, given that you aspired to express each idea correctly. You contemplate, consider if I commit an error. Consider if I choose an inappropriate term. Consider if individuals ridicule me. These feelings render you hushed. You opt to remain silent, given that you desire to be flawless. Though in reality, by maintaining silence, you forfeit the possibility to learn and to develop. This demonstrates how perfectionism covertly devastates your development. An alternate illustration happens when somebody desires to produce text in English, yet commits extended periods only attempting to find suitable phrases. As opposed to creating openly and learning, they keep pausing, examining, and updating. After they're complete, they're worn and upset. They potentially might start to suspect they're incompetent with English. Even when the genuine issue isn't their expertise, it's their perfectionism restricting them. Perfectionism additionally causes individuals to contrast themselves continuously. You could examine a different speaker who communicates skillfully and imagine I should communicate similarly or I'm unsuccessful. This perspective might diminish your drive. Rather than emphasizing your advancement, you highlight someone's performance level and feel yours falls short. It matters to acknowledge that striving for quality and maintaining vigilance aren't damaging. As a matter of fact, they comprise constructive characteristics. However, once you force yourself excessively and demand perfection in all aspects, it becomes detrimental. Perfectionism prevents you from making errors. Yet making mistakes constitutes a requirement for development. They're not indications of underperformance. They're actions that enable you to advance. Thus, perfectionism exceeds merely exerting energy. It constitutes a philosophy that declares, I have to be perfect, otherwise I'm a disappointment. This philosophy influences your learning, your professional life, and perhaps your contentment. Recognizing this distinction marks the initial phase in overcoming it. Why might individuals develop perfectionist behaviors? Numerous people don't just wake one morning and choose I'll adopt perfectionism. Perfectionism normally develops gradually and originates from various sources. Among the most prevalent reasons lies the anxiety surrounding committing errors. Beginning from childhood, numerous individuals learn that errors carry negative consequences. Throughout education, whenever we provide an inaccurate result, we notice an unfavorable evaluation. In our families, whenever we make an error, we get disapproving remarks. Bit by bit, we internalize that mistakes equate to unsuccessful performance, and unsuccessful performance suggests we lack capability. This conviction can push us to make significant efforts to escape making errors, regardless of magnitude. rather than treating errors as an element of knowledge acquisition. Perfectionists perceive them as risky and embarrassing. Yet, an additional substantial factor involves concern regarding judgment by others. Numerous individuals worry regarding others' assessments should they lack flawlessness. They visualize that others could snicker, condemn them, or diminish them. This apprehension can be quite intense, particularly whenever you're building something unfamiliar, such as English competency. You could decline speaking given that you think listeners might recognize your pronunciation difficulties or linguistic mistakes. You could decline composing, given that you're nervous someone will highlight your orthographic mistakes. In lieu of enjoying independence to test, you encounter tension to be ideal, therefore nobody evaluates you. Yet one more consideration involves motivation for impressing others and gaining recognition. Certain people mature in circumstances or academic contexts whereby they're valued exclusively once they accomplish something superbly. They come to realize that attachment, consideration, or appreciation derives from superiority. Throughout maturity, they persist in demanding themselves to accomplish difficult objectives, anticipating that same recognition from managers, professors, acquaintances, or even unfamiliar people. They feel obliged to continuously present their greatest appearance and suppress anything resembling a shortcoming. In current times, digital networks play a significant part. Consistently, we're exposed to pictures and recordings of individuals who look outstanding. Excellent circumstances, excellent professions, excellent physiques, and excellent accomplishments. Despite recognizing fundamentally that such material isn't necessarily factual, we remain prone to contrast. We start to feel that we too should be outstanding to become appreciated, pursued, or esteemed. This perpetual evaluation strengthens perfectionist perspectives, given that we resist looking worse than peers. Educational institutions and professional settings can heighten demands. Certain educational systems acknowledge solely premium marks, and learners start assuming that anything except highest ranking indicates incompetence. Particular employment environments demand instant and faultless execution, which creates worry regarding even tiniest mistakes. Throughout duration, this stress develops patterns. Perpetually examine, perpetually enhance, and perpetually remain dissatisfied with your output until it's faultless. Family influences may serve as another contributor. Particular mothers and fathers unintentionally reinforce perfectionist tendencies via insisting their offspring must constantly succeed, consistently achieve first position, or reliably accomplish each responsibility perfectly. Despite intending beneficial outcomes, the offspring might mature, sensing that approval and belonging depend upon optimal achievements. Throughout later years, they internalize this tension and keep attempting to fulfill unseen demands. Perfectionism, additionally, might result from inherent personality attributes. Particular individuals are inherently quite attentive, dependable, and methodical. Such characteristics serve favorable functions. However, whenever they combine with concern regarding defeat, concern regarding criticism, concern regarding insufficiency, they're able to develop into perfectionism. Consequently, perfectionism predominantly doesn't involve wanting to maximize your potential. It frequently concerns worry and demands. Concern regarding errors, worry about evaluations, and demands emanating from culture, learning systems, kinship, or digital networks. Recognizing these origins becomes significantly valuable because whenever you recognize what generates perfectionism, you're able to start adjusting your reasoning and your conduct. the way perfectionism displays itself in real situations. Perfectionism doesn't merely exist as an intellectual construct. It emerges in your everyday reality, regularly in minor yet profound approaches. Numerous folks aren't even cognizant that they're performing with perfectionist mindset, given that such behaviors seem usual to them. Yet, if we pay near focus, we're able to perceive how perfectionism emerges in concrete scenarios and how it quietly influences our conduct. Visualize a learner who's developing English abilities. She's learned vocabulary and grammatical components, and she comprehends several things when she hears. However, whenever it's moment to communicate, she stays mute. She desires to articulate everything flawlessly. She thinks if I make an error, listeners would think I'm unintelligent. She experiences tension, and rather than trying, she chooses to say absolutely nothing. Within her perspective, stillness feels more secure than attempting despite errors. Externally, it might appear that she's introverted. Yet, factually, perfectionism blocks her from improving and developing. A different familiar instance includes an individual who puts off assignments because they need it to be ideal. Picture someone needs to finish a documentation for learning or employment. They begin producing yet continue deleting content. They examine each line repeatedly, working to enhance each section. They reanalyze the matching section multiple occasions. Time elapses, yet the documentation stays incomplete, given that they never believe it's adequate to distribute. The timeline gets closer, and instead of experiencing fulfillment, they experience tension and fatigue. Ultimately, they might hastily complete or even forget the due date. That demonstrates how perfectionism morphs favorable impulses into lost productivity and unnecessary strain. Perfectionism can additionally show itself in routine tasks. For instance, picture someone washing their kitchen. Typical folks wash until conditions seem adequate, then discontinue. A perfectionist, conversely, could continue scrubbing the matching region repeatedly, given that they observe microscopic specks no one would recognize. They commit extra effort attempting to guarantee it's faultless, and ultimately they experience depletion. Their residence is spotless, yet they're experiencing no happiness, merely tiredness, and potentially frustration toward themselves for lacking superior results. One more circumstance occurs whenever someone desires to try anything fresh, like an individual objective, or acquiring an unfamiliar expertise, yet they continuously anticipate the ideal timing. They express, "I'll commence when I possess additional opportunity," or "I'll initiate whenever I create the ideal strategy." Fundamentally, they're apprehensive to commence, given that they want every aspect to be ideal starting day first. Yet the ideal occasion fails to materialize, and years or even extended durations go without motion. Perfectionism additionally influences judgment mechanisms. A perfectionist might invest extended duration determining something uncomplicated, like dining selections or clothing preferences. They ruminate extensively, given that they don't desire an unfavorable outcome. They desire selections to be outstanding, just satisfactory. This creates daily living feeling burdensome and sluggish compared to it ought to be. For English building, perfectionism demonstrates to be quite dangerous. Someone might decline attendance at a conversation exercise given that they're worried regarding sounding bad. They might decline transmitting written communications given that they feel anxious about linguistic accuracy. They might potentially cease hearing English broadcasts given that they're missing every individual term. In substitute for experiencing fulfillment and generating advancement bit by bit, they experience blocked and upset. These scenarios demonstrate that perfectionism isn't only concerning desiring quality. It concerns concern and demands. It's able to consume simple behaviors and turn them into demanding encounters. It makes you wait. It makes you decline. Plus, it makes you reprocess things repeatedly till you're worn out, yet dissatisfied. Recognizing such patterns constitutes the primary action for advancement. In case you're observing yourself in any situation, you're not by yourself. Several folks encounter matching circumstances constantly. The positive element is that when you recognize how perfectionism displays itself in your circumstances, you're able to commence executing gradual modifications to liberate yourself. The reason perfectionism functions as a covert advancement destroyer. Perfectionism might seem benign, given that it frequently dwells beneath favorable rationales. You're able to imagine you're simply striving to complete tasks efficiently, though basically, perfectionism is able to quietly obstruct you from developing, from progressing, and from advancing in your journey. Therefore, we designate it a covert advancement destroyer. It doesn't verbalize loudly, yet it progressively eliminates your options to advance incrementally without your notice till afterwards. Among the initial approaches, perfectionism sabotage's advancement involves suspension, alternatively described as avoidance. Whenever you desire every element to be flawless, you postpone beginning activities. You communicate to yourself, "I want extra opportunity," or "I'll commence whenever I'm prepared." Yet that excellent instant never appears. For instance, an English developer might envision, "I'll initiate talking sessions subsequent to mastering grammar." Since grammar patterns are numerous, the learner doesn't commence talking. Periods, and extended durations transpire, yet their communication abilities remain consistent. In substitute for improving via execution, they remain holding out, indicating no genuine enhancement manifests. An alternate mechanism perfectionism damages you involves creating strain and concern. Whenever you think that you have to be outstanding, you generate significant strain within yourself. Each activity appears like a challenging exam. You employ periods examining, changing, and worrying regarding errors. This perpetual stress makes your consciousness and physical being feel worn. You might encounter challenges unwinding or experiencing satisfaction concerning your execute, given that you're constantly thinking it remains insufficient. Throughout duration, such strain can diminish your energy and enthusiasm. In substitute for feeling thrilled to develop or experiment, you're experiencing apprehension and dread. Perfectionism produces overlooked occasions. Circumstances typically present themselves rapidly, and they don't linger for your excellence. For illustration, picture someone welcomes you joining a gathering to exercise English interaction. A perfectionist could refuse, given that they're concerned or distressed regarding making mistakes, though that conversation gathering could have offered an exceptional possibility to progress. Likewise, you could decline requesting professional opportunities, expressing perspectives, or beginning a fresh objective, given that you imagine you're unprepared. These possibilities might fail to materialize yet once more, and throughout looking for excellence, you miss important occasions capable of supporting your advancement. Yet, another concealed consequence regarding perfectionism constitutes minimizing your assurance. Initially, you might think that targeting outstanding accomplishments would cause you to experience encouraged and pleased. Yet, perfectionism regularly manufactures the inverse. Given that you establish incredibly demanding objectives that prove practically unattainable to accomplish, You regularly experience as if you're falling short. Also, whenever you finish something successfully, you concentrate specifically on the smaller faults or aspects that aren't faultless. Throughout duration, you start to imagine I'm not capable. This unfavorable conviction is able to damage your certainty in education, career, plus interpersonal interactions. In substitute for experiencing encouraged via your accomplishment, you're experiencing unsatisfied, which makes executing the following motion more troublesome. Perfectionism demonstrates risk additionally, since it obstructs the typical progression of development. Mastering any subject, primarily a vocabulary, demands making faults, remaking and advancing bit by bit. Yet perfectionism closes this procedure. It causes you to fear testing. Therefore you prepare less, and whenever you prepare less, your knowledge expands slower. This generates a pattern. You hold out for excellence. You stay away from exercise. Your development remains slow. Plus, given that your development lags, you experience heightened demands for excellence. This cycle continues for extended periods in case you don't identify it. The greatest covert component of perfectionism consists of it appearing as though it's assisting you whenever it's fundamentally damaging you. You could claim, "I'm simply vigilant," or "I want to succeed." Yet, actual development doesn't result from being faultless. It results from performing, committing mistakes, and acquiring knowledge from these. Perfectionism eliminates these possibilities quietly. It doesn't exclaim prevent advancement. It merely maintains you pausing, anxious, plus questioning yourself till you acknowledge that period has elapsed, plus you haven't progressed as far as you potentially could have. Comprehending such consequences proves crucial, given that whenever you perceive how perfectionism postpones your efforts, magnifies your strain, removes possibilities, plus lessens your conviction, you're able to begin making alternate preferences. You're able to select advancement rather than excellence. You're able to decide that attempting something even imperfectly beats doing nothing whatsoever. The gap concerning good objectives plus damaging perfectionism. It matters critically to identify that not every ambitious objective represents harm. Desiring to function effectively represents something beneficial. Creating aims, putting in effort, plus attempting to advance represent all beneficial habits that aid your development. Yet, perfectionism differs from maintaining beneficial objectives. The variation appears minimal at first, though it generates a significant distinction in your emotions, your execution, plus your development. Whenever you maintain beneficial objectives, you pursue succeeding, plus you're also tolerant that mistakes happen. You grasp that advancement takes effort. You inform yourself, "I aim to complete this accurately, yet it's acceptable if it isn't faultless. I'll gain insight from whatever mistakes I generate." This reasoning produces emotions of motivation, minus concern. You move forward, despite lacking complete preparation, given that you understand that exercise comprises a component of development. Perfectionism, conversely, doesn't permit mistakes. A perfectionist thinks, if I can't accomplish it flawlessly, I shouldn't try. This generates anxiety plus demands, rather than motivation. In substitute for supporting you to commence plus develop, perfectionism halts you from testing. It forces you to imagine that exclusively perfect accomplishments hold price. Thus, any minor mistake feels like a significant defeat. For instance, let's review a pair of learners that are acquiring English. A person maintaining beneficial objectives claims, "I'll test my voice in gatherings right now. I'm probable to produce some grammar mistakes, yet that's acceptable. Every instance I communicate, I improve further." This learner trains, becomes educated via their mistakes, plus develops throughout duration. Faults don't demonstrate you're unsuccessful. They show you're developing. Whenever you make a slip, attempt to regard it as beneficial intelligence. Question yourself, what information am I gathering? In place of expressing, I'm incapable. The subsequent beneficial action involves commencing gradually. Perfectionists typically feel overburdened, given that they think they have to complete each task excellently instantly. Rather, separate your objectives into moderate, simple phases. If you're looking to develop your English abilities, you don't have to provide a lengthy chat right now. You're able to commence by saying a pair of statements quietly to yourself. Later, you're able to try an informal discussion with somebody. Every modest measure increases your assurance, and bit by bit, all those tiny improvements become significant improvement. It's additionally quite significant to emphasize development rather than excellence. Question yourself, am I advanced versus a day back? Versus, am I faultless currently? Development comprises something you're able to assess, plus, it provides constructive vitality. For illustration, perhaps previously, you weren't able to produce a whole statement in English. Yet, currently you produced a set of declarations. That comprises advancement, plus importance more compared to being ideal. Should you continue stressing modest developments, you're going to think inspired to maintain advancing. Yet one more essential phase includes working on self-care. Perfectionists continuously demand significantly of themselves. They communicate to themselves in approaches they'd hardly ever talk to a pal. For instance, a perfectionist could imagine, I'm silly for creating this mistake. Yet, if a pal produced the comparable oversight, they'd likely express, it's satisfactory. You're growing. Begin addressing yourself how you'd address a person you're fond of. Demonstrate patience, endurance, plus compassion. Whenever you produce an error, convey to yourself, it's satisfactory, I'm developing. Everyone produces mistakes. This manner of inner conversation eases concern plus strengthens confidence. Finally, begin recognizing smaller triumphs. Perfectionists frequently pass by their accomplishments, given that they're occupied seeing what isn't ideal. Yet, appreciating advancement matters significantly for motivation. In case you engaged in English for several moments currently, that constitutes an accomplishment. In case you produced a straightforward correspondence with no examining it multiple intervals, that constitutes an accomplishment. Though it's imperfect, it continues to beat completing nothing. Each modest achievement signals you're moving frontward. Plus the additional you acknowledge these occasions, the greater energy plus bravery you're going to possess to maintain creating advancement. Yet one more useful element involves reminding yourself that nobody remains perfect. Also, specialists produce faults. Additionally, Indigenous language speakers skip terminology, misapply language patterns, or revise their expressions mid-conversation. The distinction consists of they don't stop interacting due to such minor faults. They continue, plus that constitutes what generates them skilled. You're able to perform similarly. Conquering perfectionism fundamentally concerns reframing your psychology. It concerns selecting execution compared to concern, understanding compared to hesitation, plus compassion compared to judgment. In case you execute modest improvements every occasion, recognizing mistakes, beginning gradually, stressing advancement, demonstrating care for yourself, plus remembering each achievement, you're going to gradually experience clearer, plus less constrained. You're going to comprehend that you're not required to become excellent to create advancement. You merely require to persist advancing. permit me to communicate a straightforward illustration regarding a language learner termed Marcus. Marcus constituted a pupil who desired to become competent in English abilities. He committed significant work. He examined numerous grammar textbooks, plus he engaged with English resources consistently. Yet despite months of commitment, his communication expertise didn't advance substantially. For what reason? Given that Marcus demonstrated perfectionist behaviors, he imagined that he must exclusively communicate whenever his statements sounded perfect. Each moment his teacher posed a question, Marcus remained mute. In his consciousness, he questioned, "Consider if I express something incorrectly? Consider if I misremember. Listeners will imagine I'm not smart." Because of these emotions, Marcus prevented discussion sessions. He devoted the majority of his effort researching by themselves, creating documentation plus memorizing principles. He visualized that at some point subsequent to learning, he'd ultimately be prepared to communicate perfectly. Yet this time didn't arrive. He proceeded discovering increasingly, yet he continued experiencing concern, plus prevented utilizing his understanding in practical discussions. At some point, his guide communicated advice that transformed his perspective. His guide expressed, "Marcus, your challenge isn't your English. Your challenge constitutes your perfectionist perspective. You desire excellence, yet excellence doesn't actually exist. You need to connect, produce mistakes, plus understand from these. That represents how you'll improve quicker." At the start, Marcus hesitated, yet he determined to test. Following gathering, he raised his arm, plus supplied an answer. Even if he doubted his statement was precise, he generated some mistakes, yet something surprising occurred. Nobody criticized him. As a matter of fact, his guide grinned, plus shared, "Superb effort, Marcus. You're improving." Since that day, Marcus established a fresh principle for himself. He'd concentrate on development, not excellence. He commenced connecting in each gathering, despite his language construction wasn't ideal. He initiated creating minimal documents to companions in English, excluding examining each phrase consistently. He taught modest phases consistently in substitute for postponing for the ideal instance. Subsequent to numerous weeks, Marcus's English interaction proficiency transformed substantially better. He felt increased convinced. He appreciated studying, plus he wasn't concerned to experiment. He identified that his mistakes helped him develop quicker compared to all the periods he'd committed wordlessly researching. Marcus's instance shows that whenever you release your perfectionist demands, you initiate the potential for genuine development. By permitting yourself to be imperfect, you provide yourself the likelihood to communicate, progress, plus accomplish substantially faster compared to in case you look forward to excellence initially. Prior to we finish, let's spend an interval to think back the most fundamental thoughts from the present gathering. These concepts demonstrate basic yet effective. Plus, if you maintain these in your consciousness, they're able to support you overcome perfectionism, plus advance quicker throughout your training, plus throughout your everyday living. Initially, we comprehended that perfectionism represents consistently attempting to turn into wholly ideal, plus experiencing concern regarding mistakes. At first, it seems like something beneficial, given that it propels you to operate hard, yet basically, it's able to avoid you from developing, from performing, plus from advancement. Secondly, we examined how perfectionism frequently originates from anxiety. Concern about producing slips, concern about judgment by community, plus concern about being insufficient. Plenty of persons experience this anxiety given to learning situations, household demands, or internet sites where everything appears ideal. Comprehending that these concerns are frequent might assist you experience less separated and remind you that producing mistakes constitutes typical for everybody. Tertiary, we witnessed what perfectionism exhibits in everyday circumstances. It displays once you postpone responsibilities, given that you desire them to be ideal. It displays once you maintain silence, instead of conversing in English, given that you desire to express every term accurately. It additionally exhibits whenever you invest extra occasion reviewing, plus adjusting your produce or whenever you decline. Starting something contemporary, given that you sense you're not fully equipped. Next, we explored for what reason perfectionism constitutes a stealth development barrier. It gradually keeps you back by driving you to procrastinate, feel nervous, miss chances, plus shed self-confidence in yourself. You're able to think you're exhibiting attention, yet fundamentally you're obstructing your development. Ultimately, we comprehended that variations survive, concerning positive standards, plus damaging perfectionism. Positive standards promote your development, given that they encourage you to complete excellently, yet additionally allow mistakes. Perfectionism, conversely, won't tolerate faults, plus causes you to hesitate to examine. Subsequent, we reviewed approaches to resolve perfectionism via straightforward approaches. Permit mistakes as a component of studying. Commence gradually. Concentrate on development as opposed to excellence. Communicate compassionately with yourself, plus celebrate tiny accomplishments. All these tiny modifications produce substantial variation throughout your development. Eventually, we experienced Marcus's instance, which revealed that whenever you discharge the drive for excellence, you progress quicker, plus experience increased happiness. By practicing even whenever you aren't ideal, you progress incrementally, plus ultimately you turn into stronger than you previously recognized. In case you recollect one sole aspect from the gathering, permit it to become this. Advancement supersedes excellence. Each modest stride, each modest work, plus each modest mistake, comprises an element of your development. Excellence doesn't constitute the purpose. Development, enhancement, plus experiencing the advancement symbolize that actually concerns. As we finish the gathering, I aim to communicate one straightforward perspective. Consider an interval currently, plus consider your particular circumstances. Exists one region where you exhibit perfectionist practices. Perhaps it involves your English development. Perhaps you postpone interaction, given that you desire every declaration to be accurate. Perhaps it involves your education or employment, where you invest extra intervals attempting to create everything ideal. Or perhaps it involves your individual lifestyle where you stress yourself to persistently complete all things precisely. Contemplate that region, plus inquire to yourself, what exists one modest adjustment I'm able to execute differently presently? It doesn't require significance. It's able to comprise something elementary, like expressing a distinct statement in English perhaps with mistakes or finishing a project without having evaluating it many intervals. It might involve providing yourself approval to attempt even if it's not ideal. One modest action might signal the inception of a big transformation. Recollect advancement doesn't originate from pausing till you're excellent. It comes from executing modest modifications, producing mistakes, plus becoming familiar with them. Each occasion you opt to move instead of excellence, you're growing, rising in self-assurance, plus developing expertise. Appreciate you significantly for distributing your moment with me presently at English Growth Pro. I definitely respect your involvement, Plus, I trust this gathering supplied you with an enhanced knowing regarding how perfectionism might covertly limit you, plus what you're able to complete to begin progressing with increased certainty. In case this served you, I'd love experiencing you back throughout the subsequent session. We'll proceed studying collectively, not excellently, plus bit by bit, which truthfully constitutes the strongest technique for advancement. Approaching following instances: maintain self-protection, remain exercising, plus recognize. Advancement consistently starts via the valor to attempt.